This is Family Time 110, and we're talking about our core values. This falls under the self-awareness, social emotional learning competency. It's about developing an accurate self-perception and starting by doing a deep dive and really looking at ourselves and determining our core values. The things we really hold to be necessary, to be essential to who we are. We often don't do that. So much of our existence is lived on the surface level. So many of the conversations we have with each other are surface level conversations. We can ask people, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite movie? What's your favorite food? And many of us have a pretty immediate response. But if we ask people, what are your core values? Many of us stumble to answer that question. When really, that is the essential question for our lives. What do we value? What do we really care about? What are the beliefs that make up who we are, the essence of us? And when we're clear about that, we define our values for ourselves, it makes everything in life easier. Life is complicated. It's messy. It's full of pain and trauma and obstacles. But if we know our core values, we can always fall back on those things. When we're faced with a difficult decision, we can ask ourselves, is this decision that I'm planning on making, is it in line with what I say my core values are? And if that's the case, if we're making decisions, if we're behaving in a way we believe to be in line with our core values, we're never wrong. We might still have pain. We might still have difficult consequences for decisions we make. But if we're trying to live by our values, that's all we can do. We're trying to be the most essential, the truest version of ourselves. That is a very liberating thing. So that's something I ask my students to do. We do this every year when we're doing our social emotional learning. We spend a little bit of time identifying our core values. I want my students to identify 3 to 5 core values. There are many things, if we sit down and make a list, many things that we value, and that's a good place to start. Write down traits, write down human qualities that we value, and that might be a long list. And then see if we can kind of group things together. I think it's important to have just 3 to 5, somewhere in that neighborhood, because we can rattle them off. We can check back in with them quickly. Yeah, there may be 20 qualities we really admire, we really think are important. But that's hard to check in with when we're in a tough spot to go, oh, let me run through all 20 of my values. If we can have 5 is pretty great to just run through, to repeat them in our mind. And we can sort of take different components, different things that we think are important, and we can kind of put them under those 3 to 5 bigger umbrella headings. We're really defining the core values for ourselves. It doesn't need to be a dictionary definition of a word. We have to decide what that means to us. So that's part of the process I'll have my students go through is, I want to know, what are your core values? we're going to write them down, take our time and figure out what are your core values. And then what does that mean to you? How do you define those core values? And why have you selected those values as your core values? This is something I really try to focus on all the time. I spent a good bit of time trying to decide what my core values were, and I've told this story before, but the idea of core values was maybe initially introduced to me through martial arts, through training Taekwondo when I was young. There are 5 tenets, 5 beliefs of traditional Taekwondo, and they're courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, and indomitable spirit. 5 great values. And I thought about those a lot, really the entire time that I was growing up, because I trained in Taekwondo, trained in martial arts from a very young age through my formative years, still train in martial arts. I really had that in the back of my mind as something that I could kind of look at and say, oh, well, am I living out that tenet? That's one thing I like about traditional Taekwondo, for instance, and I train in jiu-jitsu now. Martial arts in general, I really enjoy. One thing I like about some of those traditional martial arts is this belief system that's sort of built into the art. That's, to me, what kind of makes it an art. And that always stuck with me. Then as I got older, I thought it's important for me to look at those tenets, to look at maybe other belief systems that had been presented to me in my life, and decide for myself, okay, what are my values? And I came up with 5, and they're even fairly closely related to maybe those original 5 that were kind of drilled into me. Mine are courage, integrity, respect, love, and empathy. That's what I've identified as my 5 core values. For me, courage was the necessary first value, because even living our values takes courage. There are a lot of things that try to pull us in different directions in this life. There are many temptations, there are many challenges that can make it hard to live out our core values. And I certainly have many times where I have to check in with myself and think, I'm not maybe living out this value the way that I want to. So courage is number 1. And courage also comes with daring to do new things and daring to be uncomfortable and daring to push myself to learn and grow. That takes courage. The next is integrity. Integrity was one of those original 5 tenets of Taekwondo I learned when I was young. But integrity to me means being honest. It means trying to live by my values. Having established them, really trying to live them out. That to me is integrity. Trying to put good into the world. Trying to be altruistic. That's part of integrity for me, and that might not be someone else's exact definition of integrity, but that's what it means to me. Then respect. And I thought for my core values, I thought for me, for these to really be central to the way that I want to live, for them to really be the foundation of what I think is a peaceful and meaningful life, my values had to focus on other people. had to focus on outward connections. So there's courage, there's integrity, which are central to me a little bit, and then respect starts to cross that line between being intrapersonal and interpersonal. Where respect starts with respect for myself, to try to take care of my physical needs, my emotional needs, to try to learn and grow and better myself, but then to have respect for others. Have sort of the freely given type of respect that is just respect for others as individuals, as human beings, to try to have respect for my situation, try to have respect for whatever gifts and opportunities I've been given and not waste them. That's a big part of respect for me. And then hopefully, at least in some instances, create relationships built on respect. Built on that type of respect that is only earned. That can't be freely given. Because that's important to me as a foundational element of a healthy relationship. My next core value is love. To me, I wanted my values to sort of build one atop another. So after respect, when we establish respect, then we can start to build love. And that's with self. If I can respect myself, if I can develop some self-efficacy, I can develop a healthy level of self-love. Not narcissism, but love enough for myself to take care of myself and try to do what is best for me. And then to share that love. To be able to build up self-love so that it may be shared. So that I can do things that I love. So that I can be surrounded by people I love. And that I can share my love with those people and support them. And my last core value is empathy. And empathy to me means more than that dictionary definition. I think empathy I pick as my last core value because I always view it as the highest of human potential. That we as human beings have a capacity to pursue an understanding of others. And I also think it's the unreachable goal. That we are unable to truly empathize with others. That we don't really know how others feel. We are unable to fully share others' experiences. So I wanted that last core value to sort of be this unreachable thing to continually pursue. And the pursuit of empathy is what I really think of as that core value. It's not about actually attaining it, it's pursuing it. It's trying to understand others. Trying to understand more about myself. It's about compassion. Because compassion is feeling for others, wanting to support others, even when we don't understand their situations, their plights, their feelings. So I throw that in with empathy. It's that constant pursuit. And I think all those things sort of feed back into each other. As we learn to respect and love and empathize more, that goes right back in and it fuels us and gives us more courage. When we have more courage, we can live with a deeper sense of integrity. We can live our lives with more integrity because that takes courage. It's so important to be clear about these core values and to find a way to represent them to ourselves. We're going to write them down. Last week, for our social emotional learning, for our family time, I had my students create a visual that we're adding to, and I want my students to write down their core values. And if they want, they can create a graphic representation of their core values. That's something I have done. I have quite a few tattoos, but on both of my forearms, I have a visual representation of my core values that I designed a number of years ago. They're both different visual representations, two different things that I sort of sketched out when I was thinking of the core values. The first, on my right forearm, is a tree of life, which is something often represented in Celtic and some Scandinavian cultures, which is my family's heritage. But the tree of life has branches that go out. Then it goes into some Celtic knotwork, and that knotwork feeds right back into the roots of the tree. And I see that as how my core values work. As I feed into those core values, they branch out, they expand, they open up into greater understandings and other interests in my life, and they impact other people. And those things flow right back in and feed my values again. So I have a 5-stranded Celtic knot representing the 5 core values, all weaving together. And then they're going into the roots of the tree and then branching back out again. And even for a simple design, I like to put a lot of thought into that. For instance, there's 19 branches that split off, and that to me represented my birthday is April 19th, which if you study some history, April 19th has some not so great things have happened on that date. Even looking at American history, when I was young, it was the Waco, Texas shootout, the Oklahoma City bombing. The day after that is April 20th. That was the Columbine shooting. So around that time. So to me, it was sort of that number representing myself, but also sort of taking it back. It's like some terrible things have happened on that date, but to sort of own the mistakes that I have made in my life and just kind of use that number as a reminder. And then on the sides of the tree are actually silhouettes of my children's faces from when they were pretty young. I forget how many years I've had this tattoo, but they were really young. I took these pictures and did the silhouettes of the side of the tree, and that also to remind me of, though maybe not a human quality that I would point out as a core value, my kids are really the central thing that I value in my life. They're really my primary focus. My role as a father is my primary focus. And the other tattoo I have on my left forearm, representing the same values, just in a different way, I have an enso, which is a thing in meditation, visual representation. You'd take a paintbrush and you would perhaps meditate, and you'd dip it in ink and do one stroke of the brush in a circular motion, and that's our specific enso. And then that enso goes into a flame. That flame represents to me courage. courage being that fire that drives everything else that we do. Inside that flame, in sort of the negative space, there is a rock for integrity, being that's the rock, that's a foundation, that's our core value, that's what we grow out of. Then I have a little plant that's blossoming kind of off that rock or that foundation. And the plant represents that growing of respect. That's how we grow as individuals and how our relationships grow. And then I have the little leaves sprouting out of the plant are sort of shaped like hearts, representing love. And out of respect, we can grow love. And then that all ties into that enso, which to me is empathy, sort of that feeling of universality, that everything is tied together, that we're all connected, we all impact each other. And that's how I've chosen to visually represent my core values, so that I can look at my tattoos, I can look down at my arm and give myself a little reminder to maybe bring myself back in sometimes, and I'm not living in a way that's fully in line with those values. And I do every day, pretty much every day, make a point to spend a little time reflecting on my core values. It's part of my morning meditative breathing practice when I get up to prime myself for the day to think about those core values so that I might hopefully bring them into my day and live them and share them with others. So that's what we're doing this week. Looking at our core values, and I think this may be the most important thing that we do, looking at our social emotional learning. There's a lot of things we do, we have discussions we have where we unpack things and people can share their experiences, and that's very important. But in terms of just getting in touch with ourselves a little bit, in terms of establishing some of that self-awareness, establishing core values is a great place to start because it's who we really are. Much love.